In 1986, the FBI was gripped by serious alarm when two of their most important Soviet agents, KGB officers Valery Martinov and Sergei Motorin, were suddenly exposed. Both were lured back to Moscow and eliminated. This devastating loss sent shockwaves through the American intelligence community, raising urgent questions about how their covers had been blown. The timing was particularly troubling. Both agents had been providing invaluable intelligence about Soviet operations on American soil, and their sudden exposure suggested that someone with deep access to classified information had betrayed them. What better way to find the mole than to turn to the Analytical Unit on Soviet Matters, a division created to counter the relentless spying of the Cold War era? The head of this unit was 44-year-old Robert Hanssen. He was tasked with finding the mole. It seemed like a perfect assignment for someone with his expertise and years of experience in counterintelligence operations. The FBI didn't realize that the spy they were looking for was Hanssen himself. The irony was almost poetic. They had essentially asked the fox to guard the henhouse. It was classic spycraft, executed with meticulous precision. He would leave his house in the Washington, D.C. suburb of Vienna, Virginia, and drive a short distance to the nearby Foxstone Park, about 3 minutes away. The location was carefully chosen, close enough to his home to avoid suspicion about extended absences, yet secluded enough to minimize the risk of unexpected witnesses. He would head to a pedestrian footbridge inside the park and leave a plastic garbage bag containing top-secret documents or diskettes. The footbridge location provided natural cover, as casual joggers or dog walkers would think nothing of someone pausing near such a landmark. After that, he would place a piece of tape vertically on a signpost near the park entrance, making it clearly visible to the KGB agent who would drive past looking for the signal. This simple yet effective signaling system had been used by intelligence services for decades. Low-tech, reliable, and nearly impossible to detect without constant surveillance. Then the agent would collect the files, leave money, and place a horizontal piece of tape on the same signpost to confirm the exchange. The beauty of this system was its simplicity. No electronic communications that could be intercepted. No face-to-face meetings that could be photographed. Just silent signals and dead drops that left minimal trace. For 22 years, Robert Hanssen spied for the Soviet Union, and then for Russia after its collapse. He handed over 6,000 pages of classified documents containing the agency's biggest secrets, sending Soviet spies who had agreed to work for America to their end in exchange for $600,000 in cash and diamonds. The scale of his betrayal was staggering. He compromised dozens of operations, exposed numerous human sources, and revealed some of America's most sensitive technical collection capabilities. Intelligence experts would later describe his treachery as potentially more damaging than that of Aldrich Ames, given Hanssen's longer operational period and his access to different categories of classified information. His 88-year-old mother was shocked when she learned of his arrest. She said he had a happy childhood, but in reality, his childhood was far from happy. Like many who later turned to espionage, Hanssen's early years were marked by psychological trauma that would shape his entire life trajectory. Robert Hanssen's father, a police officer, was physically and emotionally abusive. The elder Hanssen was a harsh disciplinarian who believed that toughness had to be literally beaten into children. His father would wrap him in a rug or army mattress, pinning his arms so he couldn't move. He would spin Robert until he became so dizzy he would get sick, claiming this was supposed to toughen him up. This bizarre form of punishment left lasting psychological scars, creating a deep well of resentment that Robert would carry throughout his life. When Robert was a teenager, his father secretly arranged for him to fail his driver's test, further undermining his self-confidence. This act of sabotage was particularly cruel, as getting a driver's license represented a key milestone of independence for any American teenager. His father's interference reinforced Robert's growing sense that he could never measure up, that failure was somehow his destiny. Even on his wedding day, his father told his bride Bonnie that she was marrying a loser. The public humiliation on what should have been one of the happiest days of his life demonstrated his father's complete lack of respect for him. Bonnie, shocked by the comment, nevertheless proceeded with the marriage, perhaps not fully understanding the deep dysfunction in the Hanssen family dynamic. After studying accounting and earning an MBA from Northwestern University, Robert actually followed in his father's footsteps, joining the Chicago police in 1972. Despite his father's constant belittlement, Robert seemed compelled to seek his approval by entering law enforcement. It was a classic pattern, trying to win love from someone incapable of giving it. He was assigned to a unit investigating police corruption, which became his first experience in intelligence work. This early exposure to the world of investigations, surveillance, and uncovering hidden information would prove valuable in his future career, though in ways the Chicago Police Department never anticipated. 3 years later, in January 1976, he left to choose a new path and took the oath as an FBI special agent. The FBI represented a step up from local law enforcement, offering better prestige and the possibility of finally earning the respect he craved. Although Hanssen was never a field agent, he worked in various positions, including investigating white-collar crime and accounting in the criminal division in New York. His background in accounting and his analytical mind made him well-suited for the detailed, methodical work of financial investigations. In March 1979, he got the role he had long dreamed of: counterintelligence. He was responsible for creating national databases to track Soviet operatives, compiling detailed profiles on spies from the KGB and GRU, the Soviet Union's military intelligence service. This assignment placed him at the heart of America's efforts to counter Soviet espionage, giving him access to extraordinarily sensitive information about ongoing operations, the identities of double agents, and the methods used to recruit and handle human sources. Shortly after transferring to this division, he began spying for the Soviets. The Soviets didn't approach him. He literally walked into the office of the Soviet trade agency Amtorg in Manhattan, which served as a front for the GRU. This bold move demonstrated both his confidence and his recklessness. Walking into a Soviet facility in New York carried enormous risks. The FBI maintained surveillance on such locations, and any American entering could be photographed and identified. But Hanssen apparently believed he could outsmart his own colleagues. Soon, he betrayed the identity of the most important American agent inside the GRU, under the code name TOPHAT, Dmitry Polyakov. For 17 years, Polyakov had been passing secrets to the U.S., including critically important intelligence about Soviet strategic missiles and nuclear strategy. Polyakov's information had been instrumental in understanding Soviet military capabilities during some of the tensest moments of the Cold War. His betrayal represented an incalculable loss to American intelligence. Despite Hanssen's betrayal, the GRU didn't immediately act on his information. Only 6 years later, when CIA mole Aldrich Ames also exposed Polyakov, did the Soviets arrest him. The delay may have been intentional. Acting too quickly on information from a news source could expose that source to counterintelligence investigators. However, the Soviets later took his information very seriously, recognizing that they had recruited an extraordinarily well-placed asset. By 1981, he had moved to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., to work in the budget unit of the Intelligence Division. This position gave him insight into all of the FBI's intelligence and counterintelligence operations, including how resources were allocated. From a budget office, he could see the entire scope of FBI activities: which investigations were receiving funding, which sources were being paid, and which operations were priorities. It was a treasure trove of strategic intelligence. He worked on developing and improving surveillance tools and became an expert on polygraphs, even convincing the FBI not to expand their use, which later protected him. His arguments against expanded polygraph testing were persuasive and seemed to come from legitimate concerns about accuracy and employee morale. In reality, he was protecting himself from a technology that might expose his betrayal. He was valued for his computer skills, but not for his social abilities. In David Wise's book Spy, about Robert Hanssen's betrayal, a former colleague described him as someone who lived in the shadows. He was the last person in the world you'd want to have a drink with. Hanssen was socially awkward, often condescending, and seemed to take pleasure in making others feel intellectually inferior. His arrogance and poor interpersonal skills ironically helped protect him. People avoided him, which meant fewer opportunities for them to notice suspicious behavior. 2 years later, in 1983, he moved to the FBI's Soviet Analytical Unit. As a supervisory special agent, he studied the espionage activities of KGB and GRU agents operating in the United States. This position was perfect for someone engaged in espionage. He needed to know everything about Soviet operations to do his job, which meant he had a legitimate excuse for accessing vast amounts of classified information. The FBI and CIA had recently made two significant recruitments. Lieutenant Colonel Valery Martinov joined the Soviet embassy in Washington in 1980 and later agreed to work as a double agent for the US. He was motivated not only by money but by the excitement of espionage and the belief that America was not the enemy. Martinov represented a new type of Soviet defector, not fleeing persecution, but genuinely disillusioned with his country system and willing to help the West. Around the same time, the FBI and CIA also recruited another KGB officer, Sergei Motorin. They used his personal problems, his wife's affair with a prostitute, to gain his cooperation. The recruitment technique was classic espionage tradecraft. Find a vulnerability, exploit it, and turn that vulnerability into leverage. Motorin provided invaluable intelligence, including a complete list of every KGB agent in the Soviet embassy. This kind of information was pure gold for counterintelligence purposes, allowing the FBI to monitor and potentially recruit other Soviet officers. To protect the two double agents, the FBI assigned them code names. But for Hanssen, who had access to their debriefings, it didn't take long to figure out their true identities. His analytical skills and his position gave him access to details that, when pieced together, made identification straightforward. A reference to family circumstances here, a detail about previous assignments there, it all added up. Hanssen also revealed the identity of another KGB officer who became an American agent, Boris Yuzhin. The Soviets already suspected Yuzhin when a janitor found a spy camera disguised as a cigarette lighter in the Soviet consulate in San Francisco. Since Yuzhin was a smoker, the KGB assumed it was his camera, and they were right. The discovery put Yuzhin under immediate suspicion, but Hanssen's confirmation sealed his fate. In 1985, Hanssen wrote a letter to the chief of KGB counterintelligence at the Soviet embassy. Dear Mr. Cherkashin, soon I will send a box of documents to Mr. Degtyar. They are from some of the most sensitive and highly classified projects of the U.S. intelligence community. I believe they are sufficient to justify a payment of $100,000 to me. I must warn that Mr. Boris Yuzhin, Mr. Sergei Motorin, and Mr. Valery Martinov were recruited by our special services. The letter was businesslike, almost transactional in tone. Hanssen was offering up human lives as proof of his value, demonstrating that he had access to the most sensitive secrets. Unknown to Hanssen, CIA mole. Aldrich Ames had already revealed the identities of all three men 4 months earlier. However, Hanssen's letter served as double confirmation for the Soviets, strengthening the credibility of the information. Motorin and Martinov were eliminated. Yuzhin was sentenced to a labor camp. The fact that two separate sources had provided the same information convinced the Soviets that the intelligence was reliable and worth acting upon. Hanssen then sent instructions to the KGB on how to pay him and how they should communicate going forward, using dead drops in parks and pieces of tape on signposts as signals. His operational security was generally excellent. He insisted on never meeting his handlers face-to-face, never revealing his identity, and using multiple layers of precaution. Robert Hanssen was full of contradictions. During the day, he worked tirelessly to protect America from Soviet espionage, even creating software to help the FBI track the movements of Soviet diplomats and personnel more effectively. His software programs were considered innovative and became standard tools for counterintelligence operations. At night, he was giving away America's most sensitive secrets to the very Russians he condemned as godless, which was ironic for a man who was a devoted Catholic, attending church almost daily and spending Sundays there with his wife and their 6 children. His religiosity seemed genuine. He prayed regularly, discussed theology with priests, and presented himself as a man of deep faith. Yet somehow, he compartmentalized his espionage activities, apparently not seeing them as incompatible with his religious beliefs. He reportedly confessed his espionage activities to a priest, knowing that the sanctity of confession would keep him safe. Yet he continued sinning. The confession may have been a way of easing his conscience without actually changing his behavior, a kind of spiritual bargaining that allowed him to continue betraying his country while maintaining his self-image as a religious person. In 1988, he handed over more than 530 pages of documents, such as a study conducted by the FBI on Soviet penetration of the Bureau, which he personally managed. The irony was extraordinary. He was studying how the Soviets penetrated American intelligence while simultaneously being that penetration. He revealed the identities of Soviets whom the FBI was trying to recruit, effectively shutting down American attempts to develop new sources within the Soviet establishment. When Moscow wanted to find out how much the Americans knew about Soviet missile capabilities, they turned to Hanssen, who provided them with a detailed assessment. This kind of strategic intelligence was invaluable. It allowed the Soviets to understand American intelligence gaps and capabilities, helping them protect their own secrets more effectively. One of his most infamous betrayals occurred in September 1989 when he revealed a secret FBI and NSA operation, a tunnel built under the new Soviet embassy in Washington that allowed the US to eavesdrop on Soviet communications. The tunnel project represented years of planning, enormous expense, and significant technical achievement. The FBI had purchased a house nearby that served as the entrance to the tunnel, which cost hundreds of millions of dollars to dig, and was ultimately worthless because of Hanssen's betrayal. The operation was so secret that only a handful of people knew about it, making Hanssen's betrayal all the more devastating. Years of effort and massive financial investment were wiped out with a single act of treachery. Author David Wise aptly noted, "Perhaps it was fitting that the spy tunnel was betrayed by a mole, a creature that burrows underground." The metaphor was perfect. Hanssen had burrowed into American intelligence just as thoroughly as the physical tunnel had been dug under the embassy. The KGB was grateful for his information, and although they didn't know his identity, since Hanssen never revealed it, they knew he craved a sense of importance, so they flattered him in letters. They understood his psychology well enough to know that recognition and praise would keep him motivated. The letters addressed him with respect, acknowledged his intelligence, and made him feel valued in a way his father never had. For example, "We also again recognize your wonderful sense of humor and your razor-sharp mind. We highly value both." These small gestures of appreciation probably meant more to Hanssen than the money. They fulfilled his deep psychological need for recognition and respect. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Hanssen temporarily broke contact with his KGB handlers. The upheaval in the region seemed to mirror Hanssen's increasingly chaotic behavior. Without the structure of his espionage relationship, he seemed to lose direction. In 1993, he physically attacked a subordinate, Kimberly Lichtenberg, pulling her arm and yelling at her for leaving a meeting early. The incident left her with serious arm injuries, and Hanssen received only a 5-day suspension. The lenient punishment demonstrated how the FBI protected its own, even when they engaged in clearly inappropriate behavior. Lichtenberg filed a complaint, but the Bureau's response was inadequate. He also tried to approach a GRU officer in the garage of his apartment building with information about America's double agents, only to frighten the GRU officer, who thought it was a trap and complained to the US State Department. This reckless approach demonstrated that Hanssen's judgment was deteriorating. The GRU officer's suspicion was entirely reasonable. Any American approaching a Russian intelligence officer could be part of an FBI operation. After CIA officer Aldrich Ames was arrested in 1994 for spying for the Soviets, US intelligence realized the damage went far beyond what Ames could have caused. There had to be another mole. The case of diplomat Felix Bloch deepened suspicion. In 1989, an FBI investigation into Bloch was mysteriously compromised when the KGB suddenly cut contact with him. The FBI later learned that one of their own, Robert Hanssen, had secretly warned the Soviets. Even after catching FBI agent Earl Pitts, who also spied for Russia, unexplained breaches continued. Agent Thomas Kimmel believed a second mole remained active. Investigators wrongly targeted CIA officer Brian Kelly, whose life was ruined before he was cleared. In 2000, the FBI contacted a retired KGB officer in Moscow who had kept a secret file on the American mole. Lured to New York under the guise of a business meeting, he sold the file for $7 million. Though it didn't name the spy, it included letters, recordings, and operational details. One tape contained a familiar voice, and the mole's use of the phrase "purple-pissing Japanese" pointed directly to Robert Hanssen, known for that crude expression. His fingerprints on a plastic bag used for passing classified material confirmed it. The FBI launched a massive surveillance operation. Hanssen was given a fake promotion, his new office wired with cameras, and a young aide, Eric O'Neill, assigned to watch him. Hundreds of agents monitored his every move. When Hanssen realized something was wrong, he wrote to his Russian handlers under his alias, Ramon Garcia, saying he was going underground. But on February 18, 2001, he was caught leaving a package of secrets in a park. When arrested, he calmly said, "What took you so long?" Hanssen pled guilty to 15 counts of espionage and apologized in court, admitting he had betrayed his wife, Bonnie, who once caught him spying and believed he had stopped. His personal life revealed disturbing behavior. He had secretly allowed a friend to watch his intimate moments with his wife, and even plotted for that friend to father her child. Sentenced to life in a Colorado Supermax prison, Hanssen died in 2023 at age 79 of colon cancer. Psychiatrist Dr. David Charney concluded Hanssen's actions were driven less by money than by pride, resentment, and anger toward his domineering father. Spying gave him a sense of power and worth he lacked in life, a rebellion against authority that ultimately destroyed him.